So we're going to continue with tools for Brisk, as we call it. We're studying Masa v'Totzos HaMasa, the action and the result of the action. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for coming, and anyone who's tuning in or listening and he would like to give me feedback, I'd really appreciate it. Azarya Berzon at gmail.com. The first topic I want to talk to you about tonight is Meleches Shabbos. We know that there are 39 categories of Melacha, and probably within most of the categories of Melacha that we have, you could raise this kind of Hakira about whether it's a Maisa or a Totzos HaMaisa. We're going to start with a discussion about Zriya. Zriya means planting. You put a seed in the ground. Now, Chazal understand that it takes 3 days from the moment that you put the seed in the ground until it becomes rooted in the ground, which is called Hashrosha. And yet, quite obviously, by definition, you could violate the Meleches Zriya without Hashrosha, because you're going to be chayav for Meleches Zriya on Shabbos, and Shabbos is just a 24-hour period, so there's no possibility of Hashrosha. And in the case of Kilayim, which means if you mix two different minim, two different species, and you plant them, there too you're chayav for Zriya. However, in such a case, you're chayav only after Hashrosha. And this question can be formulated in the following way. Why is it that with regard to Kilayim, the planting has to actually lead to Hashrosha, and as far as Zriya of Kilayim is concerned, and the Hashrosha has not yet taken place, and as within the first 72 hours of planting the seeds, you don't violate the Isur of Kilayim. That's, Rashi says it in Psachim Daf Chafei Amud Aleph. And yet, in the case of Shabbos, where there too there's a violation of Zriya, obviously you violate Zriya immediately, even though the Hashrosha is not going to take place till after Shabbos. And you'll find this question in a sefer that I wanted to introduce called Mishmeres Chaim by Rav Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg, and he quotes this question in the name of the Minchas Chinuch, the Minchas Chinuch Reish Tzadi Ches, who says that in the case of Kilayim, although you chayav after Hashrosha, not before, in the case of Zriya on Shabbos, you're chayav even before Hashrosha. So perhaps we could ask the following question, and this question will be relevant to both Zriya in Kilayim and also Zriya on Shabbos. What is the chiyuv? How do we define the chiyuv? Is it the act of Zriya, or is it the result of the act of Zriya? And what would be the result of the act of Zriya? Hashrosha. So what is the Torah objecting to? What's detestable in the eyes of the Torah? Is it the act of Zriya, or is it the Hashrosha as the Totzos HaMaisa as the result? Clear. And here we can make a fundamental distinction, apparently, between Zriya on Shabbos and Zriya of Kilayim. Which way would you go?
It's the Maisa on Shabbos.
Excellent. In the case of Shabbos, the Torah objects to the Maisa Zriya. In the case of Kilayim, the Torah doesn't want your field sown with Kilayim. So the existence of Kilayim in the field as a result of your actions is the main Isur. True, you need this Zriya to bring about the result, but the main emphasis and what the Torah objects to is the result. In the case of Shabbos, the main Isur is the Maisa Malacha, the Maisa Zriya. That perhaps could be the answer. If you take a look in the Mishmeres Chaim, I think you'll see something awfully similar to that. He says, Gabi Isur Kilayim, Eina Isur HaMaisa Zriya, the Ikar HaIsur Bameh Shezruah Sod B'Sodazu Kilayim. The word Zruah is really indicative of the result. So that if you know a little Hebrew grammar, you'll find that the difference between the Maisa and the Totzos HaMaisa is always inherent in those two grammatical structures. If you talk about Zoreah, then you're talking about the action. If you talk about Zruah, then you're talking about the effect or the impact of the action in the field. Let's go on to the Malacha of Ktsira on Shabbos. And here too I want to refer to a discussion in the Mishmeres Chaim with regard to Ktsira. Now, we know that every violation of the Torah has what's called a shiur, a minimum amount, less than which you're not culpable, liable for that violation. And in the case of Ktsira on Shabbos, there's going to be a shear. What that shear is may depend upon different plants and different growths and vegetations. What happens if you do a Ktsira in two stages? Meaning first you do Ktsira of A, and then you do Ktsira in B. A is a Chatzi shear, and B is a Chatzi shear. So as long as there's no separation between the two Ktsiros, certainly we'll join them, we'll link them, we'll integrate them, and you'll be Chayav. But what happens if you do Ktsira A, which is a Chatzi shear, then you destroy the object that you harvested, and then you harvest another half a shear? Now, a similar case we're going to find in the Avera of Bali Ra and Bali Motzei, which means you're not allowed to have in your possession a kizayis, an olive's worth of chametz. What happens if you would have a half a kizayis worth of chametz in your possession? Then that gets destroyed, and now you purchase another half a zayis of chametz. Would we be able to integrate the two half zaysim, even though in between the first half was destroyed? Do we apply the principle that Chatzi shear plus Chatzi shear makes a full shear? So what we find on this topic is that with regard to Ktsira on Shabbos, in Kotzar Chatzi shear, v'achar kach nistalek hadovar haniktzar min ha'olam, it's completely gone from the world. V'kotzar od Chatzi shear, chayav. And this is the introduction to the Prima Godim, and also appears again as usual in the Minchas Chinuch in Mitzvah Lamed Beis. Now, why should this be so? In the case of Bal Yirah, Bal Yimotzei, it's quite clear that if you buy half a zayis worth of chametz, then it gets burnt up, or you burn it up, and then you purchase another half a zayis, you're potter. And what's the difference offhand if you're willing to go so far as to say that a Chatzi shear plus another Chatzi shear can be integrated despite the fact that the first Chatzi shear is gone? That means I have this action and that action, and I can combine the two. And you find that by Ktsir, according to the Prima Godim, that you were Kotzer half a shear and then Kotzer another half a shear, in between there was Nisraf. You're Chayav. Why shouldn't you be Chayav then, applying the same logic in the case of Al Yirah by Yimotzei? Now, obviously, in this context, we're going to try to apply the principle, the Chakira, what we call the tool of Maisa and Totzas HaMaisa. But here you really have to use your ingenuity to figure out how it applies. You know, make sure the glove fits. Which way do you want to go? Any suggestions? If the two shiurim have to be integrated in the totzas hamaisa, in other words, you want to see something that actually exists. Do you follow my point? Then if the first half, the first chatzi shear was destroyed before the second half of the shear, then from the perspective of the ultimate result, that which you have, do you have a full shear? You're not following. Again, what I'm suggesting is the following. If we look at an Isra and an Avera from the perspective of the Totzas HaMaisa, what do I actually have at the end of the day? What exists in the world? That's what I call the result, not the action. Then, if you did two actions, but the first action is completely gone, in other words, its impact is not felt anymore because the object went up in smoke, and then you want to integrate it with another action, from the perspective of the Totzas HaMaisa, can you do that? Why not?
Right now you only have half.
Correct, because right now you're left with half. Then there's no way you can integrate the two, because by the time you got to the second half, the first half was completely null and void. It was gone, it dissipated. Evaporated into thin air. So we said that if you own half a zayis of chametz and then you purchase another half a zayis, but in between the half a zayis that you bought on the first round was completely destroyed, that in that case you're not in violation of Bal Yirah by Yimotzei. We cannot integrate the two. So what do you see? Is it Maisa or Totzos HaMaisa? Totzos HaMaisa. What is the Totzos HaMaisa? How do you define the Totzos HaMaisa in the case of someone who buys chametz? Clearly, I understand the action is purchasing the chametz, but what would you define as the Totzos HaMaisa with regard to Bal Yirah B'Yimotza?
Having a sheer matzah.
Having. I need another word besides having.
A sheer matzah.
Owning,
excellent. The bailus. The concept here, in terms of Totzos HaMaisa with regard to Bal Yirah B'Yimotza, is bailus' ownership over the chametz. Can you say at any point in time that you own a full zayis worth of chametz? Why not?
first half is gone.
Because the first half is gone. That's history. You can't own something that doesn't exist. We'll call it a davar shelo v'oliola. But if, on the other hand, getting back to our case of Ktsira, the Torah obligates me and penalizes me for the violation of Ktsira as one of the 39 malachs on Shabbos, then where am I going to put the emphasis? On the Maisa Ktsira. No, so you did a Maisa Ktsira on half a Chefza, now you did a Maisa Ktsira on the other half a Chefza. We can say that in terms of Maisim, if we add together the Maisim, we finally have an overall view of Ktsira. Again, many Achronim would say no. They would say it's not enough. You have to have a Ktsira and then have something to show for it at the end of the day. Here you don't have anything to show for it because it was Nisraf between Ktsira A and Ktsira B. But according to the Pri Megadim, he's willing to say that for Shabbos, at least in the case of Melechas Ktsira, and we saw something very similar in the case of Zriya before. Do you remember? What do we say about Zriya on Shabbos? He can be chayiv even what? Even before Ashrasha. And why before Ashrasha? Ashrasha actually identifies the Totzah, the result of the Zriya. No, you're chayiv for the Ma'aseh Zriya. See, Melechas Hotzah, I'm almost absolutely certain that the Malacha is in the Totzah, in the result. You have to move something from here to here. Its relocation in a different Rishus is the essence of the Malacha. Therefore, I would submit to you that if you carried a half a zayis from Rishus HaYoch to Rishus HaRabim, and it was Nisraf, and then you carried out another half a zayis into Rishus HaRabim, you would not violate, you would not integrate the two half a zayis. Why not? Because there the malacha is the totzah. I have to set it up in a new place. How much do I have to set up? A full shear. That I don't have. In that sense, Melechas Hotzah would be classified together with Bal Yirah B'Yimotza not under the action, but rather the result of the action. So if we have our scorecard over here, we have Melechas Oreah and Meleches Kotzer or Ktsira on Shabbos, both of which the emphasis is on, the Avera is the Maisa. Whereas on the other flip side, we have Hotzah as a Meleches Shabbos and Bal Yirah B'Yimotza on Pesach. And there, the emphasis of the Avera, the essence of the Avera, is the Totzah HaMaisa. In the case of Hotzah, having the object here in the new location, and in the case of Bal Yirah B'Yimotza, the bailus on a full shear of chametz. Clear? Now, in the past, we've discussed the mitzvah of tashbisu, which tells us to destroy our chametz. And once again, we have to raise the question: what is the emphasis and what is the kishkis of the avera of tashbisu? Is it the act? Of the mitzvah of tashbisu. Is it the act of destroying the chametz, the bir chametz, the streifas chametz, or is it being without chametz, the state of being which results from tashbisu? For example, what happens if Erev Pesach I look for chametz to destroy? I'm very eager to fulfill the mitzvah of tashbisu, but I have no chametz in my possession. So what do the Rishonim says? Go out and buy chametz. Doesn't that sound odd to you? Because that Rishon understands that what's the nature of the mitzvah of tashbisu? Excellent, the Maisa. If it's the Maisa, so what if you're chametz free? So what if you don't own chametz, but you're forfeiting the mitzvah of tashbisu? The only opportunity you have for the mitzvah of tashbisu in this case is to go out, buy a piece of chametz in order to destroy it. It's counterintuitive, but nevertheless you want to set up the Maisa. What should I say? It's no different than buying a house in order to put up a mezuzah. Well, sometimes you have to actively set up the possibility of the mitzvah. so I have to put on a beged of dal and kafis in order to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitz. I have to buy chametz in order to fulfill the mitzvah of tashbisu. But all the other Rishonim would disagree, and they say, what? You don't have to go out and buy chametz for the purpose of tashbisu. If you own chametz, destroy it. If you don't own chametz, that's fine. Because how do they understand the ikar of tashbisu, the goal of tashbisu? Is the totzah, not having chametz. If you're in a state of being without chametz, then there's no point to go out and Now the other nafkamina would be, there's a famous machlokas in the Magen Avraham, Reb Kivega, we spoke about it. Can you send a guy to destroy your chametz for you? And the answer is, it depends. If the mitzvah is the maisa, then a guy can't be your shliach. If the mitzvah is the totzah, and as long as we destroy the chametz, that's fine. Reb Chaim Brisker claims that the source of this machlokas dates all the way back to a Mishnah about how to fulfill the mitzvah of tashbisu. Rabbi Yehuda says it's sreifa, and bir chametz al sreifa. If he isolates, identifies one particular mode or method of tashbisu, it means he's defining what? The ma'aser mitzvah. If on the other hand you hold like the chachamim, ashpasosim chol davar, mefar v'zor l'ruch, just throw it to the air. Any way you get rid of it, then you're talking not about the ma'aser, but the totzah ha'ma'aser. What about the mitzvah of milah, of bris milah? Did we get a chance to discuss this? I don't remember. If we did, all right, for me it's a chazara, it's always good. What's the story with the mitzvah? The father has the responsibility, incumbent upon the father to circumcise his son. Does it mean a ma'aser milah? Or does it mean to make sure that the son is nimo? And once again, the nafkamina is going to be shlichus. Do you have to appoint a shliach? And does the shliach have to have what we call the Torah shlichus? He's got to be in the parsha of shlichus. And I'm not even sure if shlichus can operate when there's a mitzvah of maisa. Maybe when the Torah obligates me in an act, I have to do the act personally. I'm not sure. Even though you'll ask me, but the source of shlichus is truma. In truma, I can appoint a shliach to be mafresh truma on my behalf, and I would tell you that's something different. Because there the mitzvah is not the act of hafrasha to separate the truma, but to see to it that the truma is separated and it becomes mom and kohen, it belongs to the sheva kahuna, and that's the goal of the mitzvah. So send the shliach. But I'm not sure if the Torah requires me to do an action to wear tzitzis, or to wear tefillin, or to sit in sukkah. If I can send a shliach for that, even in the Tilas Lulav, I doubt if I can appoint you as my shliach to shake the lulav on my behalf. When the Torah requires an action, the action has to be performed by the bar chiyuv who's obligated. In the case of milah, if I apply the same logic, then how can I appoint the shliach for milah? And indeed, many poskim say you can't. Then when you appoint the shliach for milah, you're really forfeiting the mitzvah, or at least a major chunk of the mitzvah. Others say no, it's perfectly okay to set up a shliach. And if you rely on those mekilim, then what you're saying is, I think, that the mitzvah that's incumbent upon the father is not the act of milah, but rather the totzah ha'ma'aser, the fact that the child is nimo, or as we say in Yiddish, gimal, in that state of being. The state of being is the mitzvah, then you're not forfeiting anything by bringing in a moel. And I don't know if you know this, but many, many fathers who have the capacity to do so will study milah in order to circumcise their own sons. And that's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. All right, maybe if you're in surgery, if that's your field, so it's not such a big deal. But for most of us, that's pretty... And then there's another minhag, I don't know if you heard about this, where the father does the chituch and the rest is done by the moel, he finishes the job. I mean, all this is based on the assumption that the mitzvah is the ma'aser milah, and by giving it over to the moel, you're forfeiting that dimension of the mitzvah. We know that amongst the averos that are related to mammon, the most perhaps dramatic of them are what we call gneva and gzela. Now, it's very difficult, almost impossible, to translate those two words into another language and really differentiate between the two. And the Rav Zichron Livracha thought, he believed, that there is a world of difference in the very essence of the Avera between Gneva and Gzela. And this I would like you to refer to the pages here, in this case on page Kuf Chav Ches. Here in Rabbi Adler's book, and you'll see he starts with a chakira, and he raises chakira both with regard to gneva and gzeila. What is the Torah objecting to? What is the, as we say, the essence of the avera? Is it the maisa gneva, the maisa gzeila? Well, no. It's the result of the gneva. It's a result of the gzeila. It's the fact that you, the nignav or the nigzal, are suffering a loss of property. So he quotes the Rav, who establishes a fundamental difference between gneva on the one hand and gzeila on the other. In the case of gneva, the act itself is forbidden. Even if, oddly enough, this is paradoxical, but the nignav doesn't suffer any loss, and we'll see that in a minute. Gzeila, on the other hand, means you suffered a loss. It's not the emphasis on the maisa gzeila, but rather on the totzah, the result of the gzeila. So, in the case of the Isur Gneva, without causing any hefsed, you can violate the Isur Gneva. But in the case of Gzeila, there's no violation unless you have a hefsed, you cause a loss to someone. Now, this evolves from an analysis of a sugya in Bava Metzia Samach Aleph Amud Beis. And the case is a person who steals, but his intention is to pay up. Right now he's stealing, but he's going to pay up. That's called Hagorev al Manas L'Shalem. And the Gemara postulates that this is an Avera of Gneva, even though his intention is to replace it. However, not so in the case of Gzeila. If a person violates Gzeila with the intention of returning it, even though the nigzal won't suffer any loss, and the nigzal won't suffer any loss, in such a case, there's no violation of Gzeila. And the Rambam, at the beginning of Hilchas Gneva, and the beginning of Hilchas Gzeila, is very meticulous about his formulation. With regard to Gneva, he includes the case of Almanas L'Shalem, but he leaves it out in the case of Gzeila. So the Rav explains that Gonev, this is in the second major paragraph on the right side of the page, Kuf Chav Tes. Do you see that? Gonev Almanas L'Mekat, O Almanas L'Shalem Asur, there is an Avera, because of what? The Maisa Gneva. Afal Pishain Hefseid Mama. However, with regard to the Isur Gzeila, there must be a Hefseid Mama. Without the Hefseid Mama, you don't violate the Isur Gzeila. Fascinating, no? And based on this chilik, he goes ahead and answers a whole bunch of questions here. I don't know if we'll have time to go through it tonight, but b'li neder, at some point, we hope in the future, we'll go through it. So once again, what is the nature of theft in the Torah? It's the act of stealing, or is it the fact that you, the victim of the crime, are left without your possession? And here's the difference between Gneva and Gzeila. Gneva, of course, is when you steal something stealthily, undercover, you sneak in, like the Bob Machteres case. Gzeila, on the other hand, is bold, under the light of day, you accost someone, you steal someone, you take out a gun and you steal it. I want to talk to you a little bit about the mitzvah of Pirya V'Rivya. We mentioned in the past the Minchas Chinuch at the very beginning of the Sefer Chinuch with regard to the first mitzvah of Pirya V'Rivya. What is the mitzvah itself? Is it the act of bringing children into the world, or is it having the children? Is it the action, the Maisa, or the Totzah HaMaisa? And here I want to mention two nafkaminas. One of them is more complicated. We're not going to get into all the nitty-gritty details, just touch on the surface so we see the concept. And that is, what happens if a non-Jew who is not obligated in period Varivya, that's not one of his 7 mitzvahs, has children, then he undergoes gerus. Now at this point certainly there's nothing to talk about if only he undergoes gerus, because his children are not halachli miyuchas achrov. But what happens if now he, together with his children, undergo gerus? And there are opinions that maintain that in such a case he has to fulfill the mitzvah period varivya. But the question is obvious. If a person performs a mitzvah when he's potter, and then later on he becomes chayav, was he yotzi yedei chovaso? No. I don't know if you can think of any cases off the top of your head. Anything come to mind? The classical case is someone was a shoter and he ate matzah on Leil Pesach, and now nishtape he became sane. So the law is he has to eat. It's a sugi Rosh Hashanah, he has to eat another kizayis matzah to replace the first. That which you implement as a bar p'tura without the obligation doesn't count for when you become a bar chiyuv and you're obligated in the mitzvah. So the question here is obvious. If the guy is potter from the mitzvah period varivya, then his action that brought about period varivya was done, like in the case of matzah eaten by a shota, b'p'tura, he was a gaber bar p'tura. Now he goes to the mikvah, he becomes a ger. Wonderful. He's obligated to the mitzvah period varivya. But how can he fulfill it through the act that he implemented before he was obligated when he was a guy? So this is the famous case of Holid, of Hoyelo Bonim B'giyuso, V'nisgayer Hu Bonav, is according to that Madhyama that he's Makayim the mitzvah period varivya, even though when he implemented the mitzvah he was not obligated. What's the answer? Excellent. Again, it's such a great tool. I love it. It comes in handy over and over. You just have to get used to it and know how to pull it out and use it when it's right. And if you use it when it's not proper, then you'll get thrown out of shiur. Then you'll get into deep trouble. But when you use it when it's appropriate, it's an excellent tool. Really clarifies things. What is the nature of period varivya? Now, if you're going to maintain that Hayalo Bodim B'giyuso V'nisgayer Hu V'heim Imoyim, he's yotze the mitzvah period varivya, it must be that the mitzvah is the totzos, having the children. He has children. Again, the process by which he begot those children, the maisa, is less important than the final result. And the other nafkamina that I wanted to mention to you is holid banim umes. What happens if a person has children and then they died? Rahman al-Islam. Would you say he has the mitzvah or not? If the emphasis is on the maisa, then what would be the answer? Yes. But in Shulchan Aruch it says that such a person has to again bring children into the world. He has not fulfilled the mitzvah period. It seems once again that what's the nature of the mitzvah period? Not the maisa mitzvah, but the totzos. It's having the children. Let's go on to the mitzvah of tefillin for a moment. And once I say the word tefillin, you could already begin to ask yourself the question of Maisa and Totzas HaMaisa. And let's see a chidush of Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Zeichat Tzadim Kodesh L'Vrocha, in his Kovetz HaOres, Simon Ches. It's brought down here again in the Mishmeres Chaim. And he is bothered by the following question. This is Sugim Bab Metziah Daf Yudam and Beis, where a man sends a woman to be makif a katan on his behalf. Hakafa is when you cut off the payas. You cut off, you do a maisa hakafa. And it's a lavdo raisa, but the Gemara says that it only applies to men and not to women. And the Gemara comes to the conclusion that in this case, at least according to Ravina, which we're not going to get into that right now, but according to one Mantiyom Ravina, if you, a gadol, an ish, send an isha to be makif a katan, then you who sent the isha are chayav midin shlucho shel adam kimos. Now, mind you, that Rabbi Chanan, in his question, operates with the following assumption. Shlichus only works if the if that which you want to transfer is meaningful for the shliach as well. That the shliach doesn't act, it's meaningful for the shliach, and therefore he can serve as an agent on behalf of his sender, of the mishalech. But if the act is totally bereft of any halachic significance, if it has no status vis-a-vis the shliach, then there's no shlichus. For example, Rabbi Elchanan quotes those Rishonim and Achronim on the question of Amir La'akum Shavuos. I send a guy to violate the Shabbos for me. Am I chayiv for such a thing? Obviously, Amir La'akum Shavuos means I'm not chayiv on a Doraisa level. I violate a Shavuos D'Rabbanan. Why not say that the act of the Shliach, in this case the non-Jew, the Nachri, should be related back to me, and I should be chayiv for violating the Shabbos? There are a number of answers to this question. But Rabbi Elchanan operates with the following answer. Since for the guy himself, it's not Chil Shabbos, in other words, the act is completely neutral halachically vis-a-vis the guy himself, therefore he cannot be a shliach to pick up the Aveira and transfer it over to the Mishalech. So I can only act as an agent on your behalf to transfer an Aveira to you if that Aveira is meaningful for me. Based on that premise, Rabbi Elchanan asks the following question. Brilliant question. If you send a woman to do hakafa, to be makif a child in this case, if he was a gadol, he wouldn't agree, because there's a lot of the nikav as well. But in a child, so for the woman, this is not an avera of hakafa at all. And since it's not a ma'isa avera for her, she was never enjoined from hakafa. How could she serve as a shliach, which the Gemara postulates that her act of hakafa as an agent on behalf of the Mishalech allows the shlichus to be chal and the chiv to be chal now on the Mishalech? How does that work? So Rabbi Elchanan, I think he was very enamored and very attached, I think, to this concept of Maisa and Tosas HaMaisa. One day we're going to try to do a statistical survey and see how much of Rabbi Elchanan's Torah and his revolutions are all boiled down, can all be traced and root to this distinction between Maisa and Tosas HaMaisa. In any event, this is a classical example. He writes the following. With regard to Chil Shabbos, let's say you send a guy to violate the Shabbos, Ha'isur hu ha'malacha. Right? What does he mean by malach in our terminology? The Maisa, exactly. And this we've seen already in Zriya, we saw it in Ketzira. Lachein, Kevan de legabe ha'akum lo chashiv klal malacha. The action as a malach has no status whatsoever. Lo shayach she is chayav ha'mishalech alei. We cannot apply the law of shlichus. Masha enken kan ba'akafa ha'isur hu. You can read the next word without even reading it. Hatotzah. Shaha'adam nikaf. The fact that you caused a person to be a nikaf, that's the nature of the avera. V'kein shekain after a ma'isa shelo lo chashuv ma'isa avera. Even though, as far as the woman is concerned, her act of hakafa does not qualify, is not defined as a ma'isa avera. Nevertheless, she could be a shliach. Why? Kevan di'ena, right? Why isn't it considered a ma'isa avera? Keina de'ena mitzuva, unless she's not enjoined from hakafa. Avol masha nikaf hu nikaf havi mitzius u'mischayev alei mishalech. This whole rule that only if the shliach is liable for a ma'isa avera, he can create that ma'isa avera because it's meaningful for him. Then and only then he can be a shliach on behalf of the mishalech. That only applies when you're dealing with the ma'isa avera. If the emphasis is on the ma'isa avera, his ma'isa is not called. It doesn't qualify as a ma'isa avera. So therefore, there's no shlichus. But if the Avera is not inherent in the Maisa, but rather in the Totzas HaMaisa, then it doesn't matter one bit, one iota, whether the Shaliach himself, or herself in this case, has the Maisa Avera, doesn't. She is creating this result, this Totzah, called what? Hakafa. The child in Mitzias is a Nikaf. That's enough to set up Shlichus. Again, we're only touching on the surface of this. Obviously, if we wanted to give a shir on this, we would have a full shir, not a chatzi shir, just on this topic alone. But once again, whether or not the Shliach L'Dvar Avera, in the case where you would apply, that's called the Labar Yuvi, do apply Shlichus L'Dvar Avera, and if the Shliach himself doesn't have the Maisa as a Maisa Avera, then you have to determine whether the Ikar HaIsur, the main primary function or the definition of the Isur, the essence of the Isur, is the Maisa, and then you go through this whole rigmarole and you ask yourself if the Shliach has the Maisa Avera, or the Totza'as HaMaisa, the impact of the result of the Avera. I want to touch briefly on a sugya in Zroim. In the agricultural law, in this case, Ma'asros. There's a Gemara in Beit Midrash on Daf Pei Ches. I don't know if you've ever learned Hasocher, but there's a lot of Zroim over there. And the Gemara has a sugya called Re'iyas Pnei Abayis. And what does that mean? You have to take your tvua, your grains, into the house. And that creates a Gmar Malacha and generates the Chiyuv of Trumas and Maasros. What is the normal standard process? You cut your wheat. I'm just giving you an example of wheat. It's any of the 5 species of grains. And then you do what's called zoreh, with a hay at the end. And you winnow it in the winnowing allows the winds to blow off the chaff. Once the chaff is removed, you bring those grains into your house. That's your classical case of Re'iyas Pnei Abayis, which literally means that the grains saw the walls of your home, and that's Kovel L'Maiser. Now it's complete Tevel L'Inyan Maiser. And the obligation to be mafresh, or what's called in English, to tithe is completely emerged as a full-fledged obligation. The Gemara wants to know what happens if you reverse the order. Instead of doing Zoreh before the Knisa L'Bayis, before you brought it in, you brought it in with the chaff on, and the chaff is called Motz, Mem Vav Tzadi. In modern Israel, it has a different meaning, Mem Vav Tzadi. It has to do with the dayan who sits on a bezdin. Okay, that's just because it became Rashi Tevis abbreviations. But Hichnisa b'motz shelo, and then he does the Zoreh inside the bias. And the Gemara has a diyun there, a very complicated sugya as to whether or not in such a case it becomes tevel. So the Rav Zichron DOV told us, when we learned Hasocher, that the issue hinges on the following chakira, on the following 2 definitions of Knisas Pnei Abayis. What generates the Shem Tevel? What is the Koveh? Is it the act of bringing into the house, and therefore it has to have a Re'iyas Pnei Abayis as you bring it in? Or is the fact that it's in the house? Is it and then he doesn't use these terms, but I'll try to apply our principles, and I hope I'm doing justice. Is the Maisa Knisa L'Bayis, or is the Totzah having the grains in the house? If it's having the grains in the house, what difference does it make whether the process was A, B, and then C, or B, A, and then C? At the end of the day, I have C. I have my grains, my tvua, in the house. But if on the other hand there's a halach of Maisa Knisa, now I can set up conditions. When is it considered a Maisa Knisa that you brought into the house? If first you removed the motes through the process of Zoreh. Ner Chanukah, perfect example of our Chakir. Who wants to formulate the Chakir? David, you want to give a shot at it? Action or result of the action. How would you apply it to lighting Hanukkah candles?
Do you need to light the candle? Or
Correct.
You have lit candle?
Correct. Is it the lighting of the candle, which is called the Maisad Laka, or having the candle lit, which is called the Ner Dolok? And this is a sugya at the beginning of the second parak of Shabbos called Kovsa, Zakakla, or Ein Zakakla. If the candle goes out, it's extinguished. The wind came and blew. Do I have to rekindle it? It depends. If the mitzvah is the Maisad Laka that I did, but if the mitzvah is having a Ner Dolok, and the shear of Ner Dolok is a Chatzi Shofar, a half hour, it's got to be Dolok. I want to publicize the miracle. It's got to be lit in my house. Then Kovsa Zakakla. You've got to rekindle it. You already did the Maisad Laka, but that's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is achieved by the Ner Dolok, the result of the action. The same Chakira, mind you, appears in the context of Ner Shebemigdash. Ba'alos Chas HaNeros, the mitzvah on the Kohen to be madlik the Neros. Is it the act of Hadlaka, or is it supplying the Azara, the Heichal, with a menorah deluka? So, for example, what would be if a Yisrael, a non-Kohen, would light the menorah, and then the Kohen would equip the Heichal, the menorah, with an air dolok. And this is a machlokas the Rambam and the Ravid. And in the case of Ner Chanukah, it's a machlokas 2 days in the Gemara, whether Kovsa Zakuk Law or Ein Zakuk Law. I'm actually fascinated by the opinion of Kovsa Zakuk Law, because if Kovsa Zakuk Law, you have to rekindle it, the mitzvah is what? Ner Dolok. What would be, for example, if I sent a katan, a minor, he's not yet bar mitzvah, to light the Ner Chanukah on my behalf? Could it be that he, although he doesn't have the chiyuv, he has chinuch, but I mean he doesn't have the chiyuv, he's not a bar chiyuv as far as Chanukah is concerned, but maybe he could create a Ner Dolok. In fact, the Gemara has a possibility, but it's rejected, of Hanocha Osa Mitzvah. What is Hanocha Osa Mitzvah? A Cherei Shotav V'Katan lit the Ner Chanukah, and then the Gadol came along and he placed it in the window. Mi Pesach Beiso Mi Machutz. One man, the other says Hanocha Osa Mitzvah, he fulfilled the mitzvah. Who did the act of Hadlaka? The Cherei Shotav V'Katan. Clearly that's not a Ma'is Hadlaka. La B'nei Dayan, they don't have mitzvahs, they're not Bar Chiyuva. But the answer might be that the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is having the chefts of the Ner Dolok. If that be the case, what we're talking about is the Totzas HaMais. But after all is said and done, if you talk about normative halacha, l'maisa, the way we paskin is Kovsa Ein Zakuk Law. We don't have to rekindle because the mitzvah is the Maisa Hadlok. And all the emphasis is going to be on the act of kindling.
But we let kids kindle.
But only midin chinuch. But let's say you didn't light your own candles, we would not allow the child to light. Again, I'm not pasking halacha l'maisa. It could very well be, and then Shulchan Aruch, I think it's Tov Reish Ayin Hey, there is such a day that if the child lights, then you're yotze the mitzvah. If the isha lights, if your wife lights, that's for sure you're yotze the mitzvah, because she shares the same chiyuv as you. But in the case of a child who's what we call a la bar chiyuva, his ma'is hadlaka is not a ma'is hadlaka, and that becomes a sticky issue in halach, whether you could have the child light on your behalf. For sure he should light on his own behalf, midin chinuch.
So we say it's the Maisa, not the Tocha.
We're going to paskin it's the Maisa Hadlok. And here I want to add another point to this discussion. Where is the Ner Chanukah? Where is it? Mi Pesach Beiso Mi Bachutz, correct? But the Gemara says, Mishas Sakona V'Elech, after it was very dangerous in a historical period to place the Ner Chanukah on the outside, we had to fulfill this mitzvah clandestinely. So you can Meinicha al Shulchan V'Dayu, you can light on his kitchen table, and he's fulfilled the mitzvah. Where's the Pirsum Hanes? We always talk about Ner Chanukah within the context of Pirsum Hanes. The answer, I believe, is that Pirsum Hanes is the Totzas HaMaisa. But we said that the mitzvah of Chanukah is the Maisa Hadlaka. Now, the only thing you could ask me here is, well, if I lit on my table, yeah, all right, it's a Maisa Hadlaka, but it's a Maisa Hadlaka that's completely mufka. It doesn't have any element and any potential of Pirsum Hanes. So it could be that Pirsum Hanes is not just the Totzas HaMaisa, but it also defines the conditions that set up that Maisa. If you light Ner Chanukah in a way that it doesn't lend itself, no way, no how, to Pirsum Hanes, because they used to light candles on their kitchen table to eat, to illuminate the living room, then there's no Pirsum Hanes, then is that called a Maisa Hadlaka? Maybe it's Mufka from Torah's Maisa Hadlaka. But the answer is, I believe that that's the takana of Mishas Sakona V'Elech, excuse me, that after that historical period came into being where it was impossible to light on the outside because of sakon of danger, then they changed the mitzvah. And they set up a Maisa Hadlaka even without any element of Pirsum Hanes. So the Totzas HaMaisa, which we always define as the special status of the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, that it creates Pirsum Hanes, which is a gigantic issue. It's such a kiyum, maybe it's Kiddush Hashem, whatever it is, it overrides many other mitzvahs. Nevertheless, we're going to forfeit that Totzas HaMaisa, and we're going to put all the emphasis on the Maisa Hadlaka, even if it doesn't lend itself to Pirsum Hanes. That's the takana of Mishas Sakana v'yeda. I do think that this is a spin-off of what we discussed earlier with regard to Kovsa Ein Zakik law, that the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is the Maisa Hadlok. Now we're going to go, with this Chakir, we're going to apply to a different area of halacha, Nizikin, damage laws. If I dig a bar and your animal falls in, I have to pay for it. What's the machayev? Is it the act of digging the bar or having the bar? What we call mammon hamazid, because it's my mammon that was mas. And I think we touched on this in the past. I'm not sure if we got into it. So the Chazon Ish in Bava Kama Daf Daled Amud Beis, I'm just giving you a Mara Makom. He asks about the following case: a man falls ba'ones, through circumstances that are out of his control, and as a result he creates a bar. Let's say he falls, with his wares, his utensils in the middle of a public domain, and now the utensils are smashed in such a way that anyone who comes by will get damaged. Or if an animal comes by, it'll rip its, it might trip, it might fall, it might rip its skin, etc., etc. And what does the man do? He's not in the mood to clean up the mess, so to speak. So he makes a statement, Harei Nechasai Hefker, that all these kalim that are now laying in the middle of Rosh Hashanah and an animal goes by, will trip on them, are ownerless. It's no longer mine. Now you're chayav for a bar because it's yours. Or, alternatively, you created the bar. But in this case, how did he create the bar? He fell with an afila that was ba'ones. So you can't hold him responsible for creating the bar. The Chazon Ish says he's chayav anyway. Why? Because the machayev of nizkei bar is not the maisa creating the bar, but the totzos maisa having the bar. If you're responsible for having the bar, even though you aren't responsible for creating the bar, that's enough to be machayev.
So why is he chayav if he makes it hefker?
Even if he makes it hefker, but it's still, he was responsible for creating that bar. If not for him, there would be no bar. And therefore, once it's his, he has a responsibility to be masalik the bar. The fact that he's mafkir it, although it's a technicality, it's not going to spare him from paying damages because it was his bar and he was responsible for the nezek that occurred in that bar. I want to talk to you a little about the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Who can fit in Maisa and Totzas HaMaisa to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah? Don't all answer at once. Is it the what? What would be the Maisa?
So learning.
The learning. All right, in Lashon Kodesh? The limud. Would it be the limud, the act of study? Or what would be the Totzas HaMaisa? The knowledge, the idea. Is it limud or idea? The nafkamina is, what if I already know the Torah? The Gemara has in Masechta Menachos an interesting discussion on Daf Tzadi Tes between Ben Dama and his uncle Rabbi Yishmael. And he said to Rabbi Yishmael, he said to his uncle, can I study Greek philosophy? Because I studied all of the Torah. In other words, Ben Dama understood that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is Yedias HaTorah. And since Kagon Anoah D'Lamati Eskol Torah Kuli, you can test me anywhere, which is a pretty impressive record, now I can study Greek philosophy. I'm part of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And Rabbi Shmuel said, no, you're chayav in the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. V'gisa bo yom v'layla. Meaning, what's the emphasis? What's the definition of the mitzvah? It's the Maisa Limud. It doesn't matter whether the Limud enhances your Yediyah or doesn't enhance your Yediyah. What would be if a person learns Torah and he just can't remember it? He can't achieve any level of storage in his memory. So Yediyas HaTorah he doesn't have, but the Maisa Limud he does have. And so forth. If you review that which you know, it's a Maisa Limud. So I would suggest there are two dimensions to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And this again is a breakaway. This breaks us into the Tzvei Dinim. It's both the Maisa and the Totzos HaMaisa. There are two dimensions to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. There's the active study, and there's the knowledge that results from that, the accumulation of knowledge. And they're both part of the mitzvah. The Rav Zichron Bracha also said that there are two dimensions to Talmud Torah, but not these two. He suggested that there's the act of Torah study and there's Keser Torah. There's the Kiddush HaGavra, sanctifying the individual who studies Torah, elevating his status in a Kedusha way. It's unlike any other mitzvah. This mitzvah of Talmud Torah has a Kiddush HaGavra, he called it. So there's both the action and the result of the action, and they're both part of the mitzvah. They make up the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And the Rav therefore justified, why are there two brachos on Talmud Torah? That's something that we don't find in any other mitzvah. I'm Tefillin Shel Yad, Tefillin Shel Rosh. If you have two brachos, do you guys have two brachos? No, I only have one. But if you have two brachos, it's because Shel Yad is one mitzvah and Shel Rosh is another mitzvah, whatever that means, because it's really one mitzvah. But other brachos, other mitzvahs only get one bracha. Why does Talmud Torah get two brachos? So the Rav said that the first bracha is on the act of lasok v'divrei Torah, the ma'aseh limud. The second bracha, which ends with the word lishma, is on the Kiddush HaGavra, the sanctification of the Torah student as a result of the act of limud. So we have now the result of the action, and that deserves a bracha unto itself. The kiyum ha-mitzvah of Talmud Torah is twofold. It's the act of study and the result of active study, namely the muchtar v'keser Torah. And maybe we have time to fit in one more discussion very quickly about Tvilas Ger. When a Ger goes to mikvah, when a guy goes to mikvah for the sake of Gerus, he makes a bracha. And the Gemara says he makes the bracha after he goes into the mikvah. He can't make the bracha before he goes into the mikvah. Now, every bracha on a mitzvah has to be over Las Yosem, before the Asiyah. How then can he make the bracha after the Asiyah? Apparently that bracha is not on what? On the Maisa, but rather on the Totzos HaMaisa, on the Chalosh and Gerus that results, the Kedusha Gerus that results from the Maisa Giyur.